Welcome everybody to another great episode of the Beyond Normal podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Groom. I'm excited to have our next guest on. They're doing amazing things in the space for folks of color. When you want to know like how a company really treats their employees, the next founder I'm bringing on, Ekow Sanni-Thomas, the founder of Inside Voices. He's got a solution for all those job seekers out there who really want to know how companies treat their employees of color. So without further ado, I want to bring Ekow to the stage and start this great dialogue. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Ascentum, which is an award-winning coaching practice that helps high-performing professionals advance and achieve the promotions and pay they deserve. Ascend to powerful heights with Ascentum. How's it going, Ekow?
Hey, Kenny, it's going fantastic. How you doing?
Doing great. Appreciate you coming on our platform. As a founder, I know you're busy. This is the Q4, so there's a lot going on. Everybody's got a ton of stuff on their plate, so it really is incredible for you to be able to spend a little bit of time with us and showcase your business. So the very first question, I want to know, our viewers want to know, our listeners want to know, before we dive into the business of Inside Voices, is tell us a little bit about Ekow. Leading up to you taking on the hat and wanting to be a founder, a CEO of a company?
Yeah, so, as you can tell from my accent, I'm from London. And I graduated with a degree in mathematics, went straight into finance, real estate finance to be exact. And I was at Ernst & Young, big four accounting firm. I was making good money. They moved me from London to New York. And even though I didn't see that much representation in leadership that looked like me, I still saw a path to the top. I still saw a route to success. I was ambitious. I worked hard. I was a top performer. I liked my life, didn't love my job. And then it became clear to me that the firm wasn't making partners at the same rate. I actually met and worked with my first and only Black partner while I was there. And I saw how far ahead he stood than the other partners. He was a giant among boys, and he was not recognized for it. And I realized that for me, making partner there was actually not going to be about how much I stood out. And it was actually just about staying long enough to be promoted, like just withstanding the storm and being in the right place at the right time. And I wasn't really interested in becoming a partner and still not feeling valued and working with people who I didn't think were the top of their field. And so I left and I joined another firm where I felt I could have more contact with the culture, where I felt I could have more impact on the direction of the organization because it was smaller, it aligned more closely with my values. It was an ESG focused fund. And they had representation in leadership. They said the right things. Sadly, 2 years later, I was leaving, having filed a racial discrimination complaint against my manager and had the company turn against me. And it was in the conversations that followed that where I spoke to other coworkers who told me about their stories. They told me about people who left before me who'd had very similar experiences. And I realized that the reputation of the firm was just a lie, that was kind of known internally and that they had no intention to change because they could keep bringing in people like me who didn't have access to the truth. And leaving, knowing that they were probably going to be able to perpetuate that cycle again afterwards, that just didn't work for me. So I built Inside Voices so that we had a way to share the truth with each other and protect each other from environments that are just not set up to serve us.
All right, that's incredible, Ekow. You laying out that whole story there for us. Starting from you being a math major. I'm a fellow math major myself, and so it's always good, good to connect on that note. But then, it sounds like you put your all into your career path, and then you notice some things. You notice some of these kind of underlying, behaviors that we see in a lot of businesses. And, oftentimes you hit on it, like it goes kind of untold to the next person who's going to come in, and they come in unaware. So talk a little bit about, like as you have had conversations with people, why do you feel like now is the time to have a platform like this? We know some of the other platforms that are out there, the glass doors, there's some other ones out there. Like what, like why specifically a platform for people that look like me and you, people of color, to go to really kind of get the real deal on the companies that are out there?
Yeah, a multi-layered question and a great question. Like, why now? I mean, listen, it's just a fact that you know and I know that after 2020, you can't put that back in the box. That energy that came from, particularly, you know, from black people, around the fact that we had waited for change and were, you know, expecting more and we're just not getting it. You know, that energy needed a place, still needs a place to live and thrive, and to be housed. And for a while, we were placated by promises made by companies about the efforts they were going to make in diversity, equity, and inclusion, the anti-racism agenda, the money they were going to donate to all these causes. And immediately it became clear, because we've been through this cycle before, it immediately became clear that some of those promises were not going to be kept and that we needed a way to hold them accountable. Now, I'm a firm believer that companies, you know, we like to talk about companies as if they're like, you know, these mythical creatures. But in reality, they're made up of people just like you and me. And, you know, when you talk to any DEI consultant, they'll tell you the majority of their business came from internal pressure, where people inside the company decided that they needed to push the company to reflect their values and reflect what they wanted more. So I see, and I saw, grassroots support for us working together to protect ourselves from poor environments, to vote with our feet, to punish companies that mistreated us, and to celebrate companies that did more. And I wanted to build a systemic way to do that, to respond to the systemic problem that we had of discrimination, particularly in work, which is obviously has a huge impact on redistribution of wealth. Now, why not Glassdoor? Well, I mean, Glassdoor rolled out diversity ratings that summer or later that year after George Floyd, which, you know, embarrassingly slow. And all they did was add a 5-star rating for diversity. So that covers all different types of diversity. And we know that a company can be good at gender diversity, for example, and be terrible when it comes to race or disability or any other category. So I felt like we needed a specific solution. We needed a space that felt safe. We needed somewhere where we were asking the questions that actually mattered. You know, just rating diversity out of 5 means absolutely nothing to me. I want to understand, when I get there, how will I be treated? Will I be paid in line with my peers? Will my performance be effectively, appropriately evaluated? Will I be promoted at the right rate? Are there people that look like me at the top that can look out for me and protect me if things go wrong? These are the questions that we're asking on Inside Voices, because we actually want to get to the real answer, which is like, should I go and work there? Is this place going to be safe for me? And even if you say I should go and work there, should I go and work there and expect to stay? Should I work there for 1.5 years just for the paycheck? You know, tell me what this place really is so that I can make the right decision for my career.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you hit on something there. I've seen in the past, even going through my career, you know, where there's those instances where there's something that's not quite right. But yet when I go to a system like a 1 to 5 star, and it's just like a generic, I found myself saying, well, I work with some really great people, but the company did you wrong. So, hey, I may rate them a 4 or 5 star. And it's like, no, like based off of that situation that you were in that kind of forced you to move, you should give them a true rating. But for some reason, it's really hard for people when they see, just like you said, just a generic question of, you know, how does this company do based off of X, you know, like, and it's 1 to 5, like, it seems so. It seems like it's making the conversation too simple, too black and white, right? And there's color in between there that needs to be painted. And that feedback that people end up giving sometimes, that can be like super duper helpful for somebody who's looking, you know, for that next opportunity and really trying to find a true fit.
100%. And really, what we were trying to do was replicate the experience that a lot of us have already had of seeing a company that we were considering applying for or were already in the process of being hired for, and wanting to get that validation from someone who looked like us, who understood our experience as to how much race was going to impact my experience at that company. You know, trying to find someone, spoken to people who've looked at someone on LinkedIn or had a friend of a friend call and say, hey, can you talk me through what it was like to work there? That is something that we've been doing for decades because we've already known that we needed to have that information. This was really just trying to formalize that. And when you had those conversations, you didn't call that person and say, hey, can you rate the company you worked for out of 5? Now, you asked lots of questions. You wanted to know all the different details and you tried to figure out, well, how much of what they said is going to apply to me? And if that happened to me, would I be accepting of that situation or would I have to leave? So we're really trying to like replicate that real conversation so you can get that like rich contextual information about the situation to make a decision.
I love that, Ekow. And so you mentioned the name a couple times, Inside Voices. When I think of Inside Voices, for some reason, I think of like my like I go back to like my grandmother, and then like me and my little cousins were inside and we're like excited about a cartoon or something, and we're kind of loud, and she's like, Inside Voices, please. Like, tell us a little bit about like what that name means, like the branding behind it, because I think there's some cool meaning that and story behind what you put behind the look and feel of Inside Voices.
Yeah, it had a few meanings. Like we really wanted to replicate that feeling of getting almost insider information on a company, the kind of conversations that you can have with someone and the information you can get from someone that has been in an organization for years. They often don't even realize how deep and rich the information they have on that organization is. They start telling you things. You're like, wait, I don't even understand. Where did you start from? Let's roll it all the way back. So like really just trying to capture that inside element, and then also that safe space whisper network element of use your inside voice. Let's share this information with each other. We're not here to be screaming this from the rooftops, right? We know that if spaces get filled with certain people, they're not always safe anymore. This is an opportunity for us to share information. And I mean, to be frank, there's still work for us to do in improving the way that people write reviews to help make sure that information does convey as much of the context and truth and credibility that the writer has, and really allows you to paint a broader picture. But we have some plans in the works for that.
Yeah, I love that. I love the forward focus. So I want to switch things a little bit. Talk about you wearing the founder hat a little bit. You talked about your background. I'm curious, like, what from your background have you taken into this experience as a founder that you relied upon, like some of those strengths that, like it is putting you in a good position to run this business moving forward?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is, my job for a lot of the time that I was at EY was going to businesses and speaking to pretty much everyone within certain departments, finding the common threads, finding a way to connect with people who weren't necessarily ready to give you the information that you needed, and then distilling it down. And a lot of founder life, particularly for startups, is speaking to different people, understanding the common threads. Like I'm speaking to users and trying to identify what's the commonality between their experiences. What is the thing that's tying these things together? Sometimes people tell you they want something, but they actually don't want that. They think they want that, or they actually wanted something else which would solve their problem. So what is the question behind the question? What are they really saying? And then I think for me, one of the others is attention to detail. One of my main roles used to be scanning documents, trying to identify errors. And luckily, I'm now at a point where I can pick something up and see the issues with it immediately. And that's necessary because we have to move pretty fast. Most of the people that I'm working with have not done the exact things that you're asking them to do at any moment before. So there's always going to be mistakes. Being cognizant of that, understanding that human beings are fallible. That's why we check work, but being able to move fast as a result. I'm very happy with my attention to detail. It's helped me to progress and help to keep Inside Voices at the level that I want it.
I love that. And then on the flip side, what's an area where, as a founder, you wear so many different hats, you're responsible at the end of the day for it all, every aspect of it. So I'm curious, like, what's an area where you've had to spend a little bit more time, maybe because you haven't had that experience, or, that's you just know, like, here's an area I want to make sure I strengthen the business in, and you may need some help, or you just want to spend more time in. So tell us a little bit about one of those areas of the many hats that you wear as a founder?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I think one of the most challenging is approaching and understanding that you have to become a salesperson. I didn't have any previous experience in sales, and when you don't, the learning curve is steep. Sales is hard to learn. You learn by failing mainly, so you have to accept a lot of failure, which for an overachiever is hard to accept early on. And there are differences in the way that you approach a conversation when you're trying to sell someone versus when you're just trying to have a conversation, you're just trying to inform someone, or you're trying to win them over to your side, but there's no personal gain. It doesn't feel like there's an extraction of value. So definitely having to adjust my mindset to accept that, conversation, live in awkwardness, be prepared to negotiate, accept that, if someone buys, it's a win-win, and you're not like squeezing things out of them. You're not tricking them by making them buy, realizing that emotion is a large part of selling. So like just laying out the facts isn't necessarily going to win everyone over. Sometimes you have to make it real for them. You have to get into their perspective, understand that even when you're selling to a business, you're actually selling to an individual. So let's talk about the wins and losses for that person within their role, not just, oh, your company can do this, but you will look like the hero because this happened. That was definitely something and still something that I'm working on. I find it to be extremely interesting. It can suck up all of your time and drag you away because there's just so much to learn, and it's obviously extremely high stakes. And on that note, I would say the other thing that I had to learn was time management. I came from a job that I've been doing for a long time. I knew exactly how to do it. We knew exactly when we had to do it. It existed for decades. There were structures and predetermined deadlines. No one ever needed to ask what they needed to be doing at any time. Everyone knew. And all of a sudden, boom, I set the deadline. I decide how long things take, when they're going to go out, what I'm going to be doing at any moment. Do I need to be on calls next week, or do I need to be building? Do I need to be tinkering with this person? Is it time to recruit, or is it time to do marketing? And that is definitely a new skill set.
Yeah, those are two gems there, Ekow. I appreciate you sharing those. And as you were talking, you're giving me perfect segues here. But one of the words that popped in my head was the word no. So talk a little bit around how you, from a sales perspective, like when you hear no from a prospective client or just somebody you're talking to about the business, what do you go through? Like what's your mindset like, when you hear somebody say no in a conversation, where I'm assuming a lot of times you're looking for that yes throughout the day. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Personally, I actually find no to be extremely helpful because you will actually find, I'm sure you know this, but I often find that people don't want to give you a no. Even if it is no, right, the answer is that you're not going to get it. They don't want to deliver that message because they're afraid of seeming rude or offending you or hurting your feelings. Whereas actually the information you can get from someone who's given you a no is so helpful, right? This is, when you're in a startup, you're doing something essentially that no one's done before. This is a new product. How do we make it better? What actually resonates with people? I can't just build for what I personally want. I have to build for what appeals to a larger group of people that are not monolithic. So where can I identify things that, if I introduce this will appeal to these people? It's really hard to get that information without butting up against things that people don't like. And so you actually need to be in conversations where people are telling you like, no, I don't like that. No, I don't want to do this. And then getting the feedback about why. Now, one thing I absolutely detest is hearing no without feedback. I just find that to be extremely unkind. Brene Brown talks about you got to be clear to be kind. And I believe that 100%. Like if you're going to tell me no, that's fine. I'm not going to try and change your mind. I understand you have your reasons, but please do me the service of being honest about your reasons. Like help me understand what went wrong or what went right so that I can be better for the future. If you just give me a no and then you give me some fake warm, maybe next year answer and you don't tell me the truth, then you're wasting my time. Now all the time I've spent with you has been a waste. I've learned nothing from it. And as a result, you're actually costing me. So that's not a favor at all.
Ooh, Ekow. That is a mic drop moment. So, wow, know with a reason. I had, like, you were talking there, like, I don't know why, but I was trying to like make sure that stays within my memory bank, because that one is powerful. That's a powerful way of thinking, like you said. And so on the flip side of that, you mentioned time management. As a founder, I know your schedule is probably disgusting. Most founders I come across, the schedule is like insane, managing personal and business. So I'm curious, like, how do you determine, like, how do you go about determining what gets on your calendar and what you have to say no to, staying with that no, that word of no? Like, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll be candid and say that I don't think I figured that one out. I think I go through boom and bust cycles. There are times when I'm extremely efficient with my calendar and I know exactly who to say no to and who not to. And then there are times where maybe we haven't had any wins in a while, and it's seemed a little bit murky and I'm not quite certain where the next bit of success is going to come from. And so I get a little bit looser and I say yes to more things. And then usually by the time those things come around, I wish I'd said no. So I've actually been trying to get better with that. I'm working with a coach who had me sit down the other day and look at my calendar for the next 3 weeks. And we had to slice a bunch of stuff out because I was stressed and not even overworked, but overwhelmed because there was so much context switching and so many things were interrupting what I considered to be the most important short-term goal. And it had actually gotten my calendar to a point where none of it was serving what was the thing that I needed to be doing in the next 2 weeks. And I couldn't carve out time to do that thing. And he just said, okay, well, let's look at the calendar and decide, is this going to make my business successful? What are the chances of success? What's the likelihood and what's the impact? And if we're not hitting above a certain level, some of these have to go. And then I just had to send those people emails and say, hey, I know that we agreed to have this call. Let's push this into the new year and see if we can find time for it then. But right now, I need to be focusing on X, Y, Z. And people remind me, as much as we need to be speaking and interacting and talking and, we like socializing within and networking, even within professional context, people hate Zoom calls, right? So you message someone and say like, hey, we're not going to do that call anymore. Part of them is disappointed, but part of them is also thrilled. So just accept that, clearing your calendar and readjusting, and making up for the fact that, yeah, at that time I did believe it, but now I understand that that was a mistake. I'm trying to get better at that and trying to make the right decision in the moment more.
Oh, that man, I appreciate your honesty around you still figuring that out. And like you said, the Zoom call, I think a lot of us are at a point now where we wish it would kind of go away and give us a little bit of a break. And I think just throughout the last 2-3 years, like we spent so much time having conversations remotely that I think it's going to probably feel like a seismic shift in the coming years where people just being like, how do we get in person? Like, how do we get more in-person contact? I know you've had some speaking engagements this year. I've had some limited ones as well. And I could just tell you, like, the energy, like just being in the room with folks after not doing it for a while, like it was kind of like intoxicating. I was like, I need to have more of this. Right.
Yeah.
And so I like you touching on that. I think stuff comes in waves, but to your point, I think now we're headed towards a wave. I think it's a good thing. We're in person, having dialogue with people, breaking bread. I know that's an old school term, but I think people will see a lot of value in those interactions moving forward. When we're in person, we're going to appreciate it so much more.
Yeah. And I think we are having more interactions now because of Zoom. We're speaking to people on the other side of the country who we wouldn't necessarily get to be in person with, but those in-person interactions are so sticky. I had a conversation with a guy 2 weeks ago who I'd spoken to on the phone a couple of times, and he was not looming as a big character in my mind. It wasn't a big part of the plan. Then we sat down and we had dinner together, and now at least once a day, I'm thinking about this thing that I owe him or the conversation that we had, because all of a sudden in person, there's all this, I don't even know what it is, the energy of two people bouncing off each other, maybe chemistry is the right word. And it's completely different.
There definitely is something there. So we've touched on a lot. One quick thing though, you mentioned having a coach. I'm curious, is that like something new that you've implemented since being a founder, or has that always been a part of your routine in terms of personal development, career development?
Definitely new for me. In the first 6 weeks after I went full time, I was just drowning, had absolutely no idea what I was doing. My calendar was a mess. Every day I would wake up and go back to sleep feeling like I'd achieved nothing, while working frantically the entire day. And a friend of mine was getting certified as a coach, and she said that she needed someone to work with to fulfill some requirements for the qualification. Did I want to do some sessions with her? I was like, listen, it's free. So yes, and I'm doing this for you as a favor, but maybe this is going to work out for me, but I don't believe it will. And transformed my working life. I managed to take hold of my calendar. I came to understand how I work best and how I don't. I now have more grace for myself. I think if I continued along that path, I would have burned out in less than 6 months. And here we are over 18 months later. I think working with a coach has been extremely impactful, and something that I would recommend to everyone. Now, I didn't stay working with her the entire time, and the coach that I'm talking about is actually a new person that I've just started working with. So I do think it also is about going through phases. I don't want to be reliant on any individual to be able to achieve, and it's not necessarily financially viable for everyone. But a huge part of I used skills that I got. Excuse me. I used the skills that I took from that relationship, that even short stint of sessions. I use those skills every day, every single day.
Yeah, that's powerful. You said one thing there, grace for myself. I think that's so important moving forward. And I appreciate you. Again, that's a candid moment. You being vulnerable, being open, having grace for yourself is that is a blank check type of statement to be able to say. And when you get to that point, the feeling I can only imagine that you have right now, saying that you give yourself grace, that's got to be powerful. So I appreciate you sharing that on our platform. One last thing I wanted to touch on, not last, but the next thing I wanted to touch on is around inside voices, right? You specified there's a really big focus on getting the feedback from people who are in the jobs day to day, so that, people who are coming in, prospective or not, can have a lay of the land, understand what goes on and the dynamics within the company. I'm curious, usually these types of products are like two-sided, and there's a company component as well. I'm curious, are you thinking about this as a two-sided marketplace? And how do the employers factor into this in terms of taking some of that feedback and in an ideal world, wanting to improve their business? Like, can you talk a little bit about the employer piece in this Inside Voices product?
Yeah, 100%. Another great question. So, when we launched, there were conversations. People even suggested to me that I should bring employers on board from day one. And for me, that was just a non-starter. Without being able to establish ourselves as a brand that cared about the employee, because that was extremely important, right? We're asking people to trust us, often with stories that they've never shared with anybody. So without being able to establish ourselves as that first, I didn't think it was appropriate to start bringing on voices that are probably better at talking about this, have a language for how they coach the way that they've behaved. Just felt, incorrectly aligned. Now that we have traction, now that we have people writing reviews and people understand who we are, what we stand for, can we introduce employers to a certain extent? Yes. Now, I don't think, and this is a startup, so you never know what the future holds. But right now, for me, that doesn't include allowing companies to respond to reviews. I see that as a part of maybe a glass door that doesn't necessarily serve the employee, and actually could re-traumatize employees that have been through particularly difficult situations. One of the things that, if you look to these two-sided employee-employer review marketplaces, as a company, we will always sit at the intersection of their two interests. And often those interests, they're not aligned. The employers probably want less visibility, and the employees want more transparency. So at the moment, we don't have employers on the platform, but we are introducing the ability for employers to claim their company profile for free. Now, that claiming is about being able to take the communications that they have elsewhere around their diversity initiatives, their diversity goals, their diversity results, hopefully, and post those on the platform, on their company profile, so that they can show who they really are. So I think it'll be really interesting to have all those diversity statements in the same place. So companies that didn't really put any effort in can see how similar theirs are to everybody else's. But that is an opportunity where we're going to give companies an opportunity to reflect who they are on the platform. Now, if they want insights about what's being said about the company, they can see what's there publicly, but we're not giving them insight into what's being said behind the scenes. We're not giving them further details into the analytics. What we have built is an internal version of the platform for companies to use to get even better level data from their own current employees. Because what we've really done is we are canvassing your employees and putting that information out there. Well, we can allow you to get that information internally, and you don't even have to share it, but you can use it to improve the experience that they're having. So you don't have to wait until they go and post on Inside Voices or they go post on Glassdoor. Companies struggle right now to get honest feedback about the most important elements of what impacts the experience for employees, particularly underrepresented employees. They do not know how to ask the questions. They can't get the employees to believe that they're not going to punish them if they identify themselves. And so they need an environment that's really anonymous, that gives them a lot of guidance around the questions to ask, that lets them get iterative feedback so they can keep working and improving, so that they can actually build inclusive workplaces that actually reflect not just what we're told an inclusive workplace should be, but what the employees in that organization want the workforce to be, want the environment to be. And so we built that because we do hear from employers, I wish I had access to these insights. I'm like, well, I'm not going to betray these people's confidence and sell it to you, but I can help you get it for yourself.
Yeah, I like that approach. And like you said, the trust of the employee to provide that feedback. In this case, that's something that a lot of companies are missing, right? And so, like, I don't even if your employer sends out an anonymous survey, like a lot of times there's still that skepticism that comes from the employee. So I could definitely see the value in partnering again with Inside Voices, and you can kind of help them, like you said, understand what their employees are saying and what they can do to make some significant changes if they really want to. I love the way that you position that. So, there's a concept that we came up with around world domination. And so I asked my founder guest this: what does world domination look like for Inside Voices in this example? You could give us, 3 year out, 5 year out, but what is that like? What do you want this to be when it's fully matured in your eyes?
Wow, what a fantastic question. For me, I really want Inside Voices to be a category defining business that demonstrates that you can do well while doing good, that diversity pays, that you can take the energy and the motivation, the momentum of the grassroots experience, the fact that people want companies to be doing better, you can channel it and you can get revenue from it. You can change businesses as a result. We can actually get progress and we can make money and we can grow and be large and finally get results from the $8 billion a year diversity industry, and have the kind of large household name business that is required to have an impact on the future of this country. I think people often underestimate how far the will of the people is from the actions of our governments and the things that we have to experience on a day-to-day basis. We actually have very little control. The only way that we can get that control is by consolidating behind symbols and myths that can channel that and work on our behalf. And I see Inside Voices as a perfect way to do that because we already want this. There are already millions of us trying to squeeze out ways to do this in individual corners of the country, in individual corners of the globe. And I'm trying to build a systemic solution that can spread, be scalable, and then have the required power, the necessary power to impact other areas of the workplace and other areas of our lives.
I love that. That's world domination, like you said. Like there's an incredible population already asking for a product like this. It's surprising that it hasn't been created yet, but I appreciate you, Ekow, putting the time and the energy in. Let folks know, like, in terms of how they can engage with the brand. I know you're in a beta mode now, but you're still getting feedback. You're growing the platform. Tell folks how they can interact with the brand, and just stay in tune to how you're growing this company.
Yeah. So first of all, first thing I'd love everybody to do, go to www.insidevoices.io, write a review. If you want to follow us, hit us we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, at insidevoices.io, at insidevoices_io on Twitter, I think. And if you are a company that you think could do a better job of building a robust DEI policy, understanding what its employees of color and its underrepresented employees actually want, go to our website, hit the For Employers page, get in touch. It's time to actually put energy behind all these hopes and dreams about our companies doing better. It's time to start holding companies accountable for the fact that they made promises 2 years ago. And a lot of them are have already reneged on those promises very quietly. Let's make some noise. Let's let our voices be heard. Let's amplify ours and each other's voices and get the word out there that energy from 2020 is not going away. So get on the website, write a review. And if you have strong feelings about anything you see on the website, anything you see in our social media, hit us up, hello@insidevoices.io. I like to hear from people. I like criticism about product. I like criticism about marketing. Anything you see that you don't like, you think is not representing us properly, that we could be doing better, that would allow us to be more successful in avenue, if you think you have an opportunity, whatever it is, send it to us. We're all ears.
Appreciate that, Ekow. Website, social media, we'll make sure that we put that in the show notes for sure. But again, Ekow is asking for that feedback, and we got a great opportunity to give it to you. Again, thank you so much for being on the platform, sharing your story, leading up to you starting Inside Voices, and now you're wearing that founder hat proudly, that founder crown. And really excited for you to see how this platform grows. You got plenty of potential, plenty of runway, different ways that you're thinking about growing the business. So excited to see that. Lastly, I want to pass it to you one last time. What do you want to leave our listeners with? That lasting note, that lasting comment, as folks, what do you want folks to take away from this conversation, this great conversation that we've had, headed into closing out the year strong, and then thinking about, how we complete those goals for world domination?
I would say, listen, I know you're tired. Like, I know it's been a tough year. It's been a tough few years. You have your own personal concerns. You're fighting your own battles. But change is not going to come unless we push for it. So make your voice heard internally. Take the chance. Do the little bit of extra work. Be aware of your own tolerance. Be aware of your own threshold. But push as hard as you can. This is not going to happen without us. And every single day, one of us falls by the wayside as a result of corporate misbehavior, misconduct, and companies just failing to live up to what we've asked of them. The only people that can hold them accountable is us.
Thanks for that, Ekow. Perfect mic drop moment. Thanks for all the listeners tuning in to another great episode of the Beyond Normal podcast. Thank you.